So for Gertrude Stein, I might have become what she fears most, which is someone who's more interested in her as a colorful character at an interesting time period than in her writings themselves. And it happened because I read these two books, and the nonfiction book I read because I always want to know more about Gertrude Stein, and this was supposed to be a very good one. This is a fascinating book because the first half is a good biography of her life, but more interestingly, the second half is the scholars who tried to rescue her from oblivion for being one of the first great modern writers. You know, someone at the level of James Joyce or someone like that, who she detested mostly because he was getting more fame than she was. And what this book made clear was she understood she wasn't going to be well known in her lifetime for a very forward thinking modernist type of writing, and so she made sure to donate her archives to a library so they could be gone through. And this is a story of how those scholars went through them and how and got these texts out into the world, and how other artists started to more be interested in her work. And so it's a very well done nonfiction. She is a fascinating character. And you see that, these are real people. She was rather, she could hold a grudge. And it was also very fascinating to see her partner, Alice B. Toklas, and how much she dedicated her life to her partner and to her partner's writing. But she might have been the secret ruler in the relationship. But it's a fascinating story, maybe a little sad. I'm still not sure. And then I thought, well, I have to read some of her writing. And so I read the Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, which was her famous book where she pretended to be her partner and write her own autobiography. But really, she was writing about herself. And in that book, she always referred to herself as Gertrude Stein. Other people were just first names like Picasso or Matisse. But she was always Gertrude Stein. And I could see why one of the modern critics said, I just can't get into her. The modernist writing is so, nonsensical, and the autobiography is just so self-aggrandizing. And it kind of is. Like, yes, she was there at the beginning of the Cubist movement, and yes, she was really good buddies with Picasso, but, I think he's a dick. You can make good art, but I don't care so much about your art if you're a dick. And she thought Matisse's art wasn't quite as amazing, but he was a good cat, and he made those colorful cutout things that now my family replicates around our home. But all that aside, I did like reading the autobiography because it's an interesting time in both Parisian history and art history time. But yeah, she's just kind of also using this as a way to brag about herself and her writings and to get them out there in the world. And what I learned from the biography about her is, the autobiography is what gave her great fame, but also she was having a huge trouble with her partner, Alice B. Toklas, who she wrote the autobiography in the name of at that time, because Gertrude was never honest about a previous love affair just before Alice came into the picture, and that came out just as this book was hitting big. So when they did their grand tour of America, when she came back to the States after, I think, 20 years abroad in Paris or in France, she did this great tour and was really finally seen as a celebrity and a great writer, but she was having huge difficulties with her quote-unquote secretary slash long-term partner during this time because of all of this coming out. And so it was fascinating to read. I'm so glad I know more about her, but maybe other people disagree with me, and maybe they'll point me to the books I should read next, like The Making of Americans, perhaps. But I'm not that interested in diving into more of Gertrude Stein's writing. And I see the artists who kind of picked up her stuff and ran with it, and it's not the kind of modernism that I like. I don't like playing with form for form's sake and all of that stuff. Most of my books that I read now are like 19th century or earlier, and there's the modern playing with stuff I don't think is going to stand the test of time. And so perhaps I'm wrong and I should be reading more Gertrude Stein. I am very glad that I read both of these, and also as someone whose work is the history of cannabis, it's good to know more about Alice B. Toklas and her famous cookbook, because that brought the idea of hashish fudge out into the world. So I'll certainly be referencing that in my graphic novels in years to come. But I do think that this biography of her especially was excellent, and if you're interested in Cubist art history, the autobiography is also cool.